This episode is brought to you by Nordstrom. Summer's almost out and fall's calling. Luckily, Nordstrom has everything you need for the season ahead, all under $100. Discover new arrivals from your favorite brands like Mango, Princess Polly, Wave, Free People, BDG, and more. Whether you're planning a last-minute getaway, heading back to class, or refreshing your office looks, you'll find the latest trends and beauty must-haves without breaking your budget. It's easy, too, with free shipping, free returns, and in-store order pickup. Shop today, in stores, and at Nordstrom.com.
This episode is brought to you by Dogfish Head Craft Brewery. The Grateful Dead and Dogfish Head have gotten the band back together with the release of Grateful Dead Juicy Pale Ale, a light-bodied pale ale brewed with sustainable Kernza grains, granola, and heaps of good karma for a refreshing brew that's music to your taste buds. Available nationwide. Visit dogfish.com to find Grateful Dead Juicy Pale Ale in your neck of the woods. Dogfish Head Craft Brewery is located in Milton, Delaware. Please drink responsibly.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. From streaming to shopping, Prime helps you get more out of your passions. So whether you're a fan of true crime or prefer a nail-biting novel from time to time, with services like Prime Video, Amazon Music, and fast free delivery, Prime makes it easy to get more out of whatever you're into or getting into. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Wayfair. Podcasts follow us everywhere. Whether you're cooking in the kitchen, chilling in the living room, or pretending to fold laundry in the bedroom. And with Wayfair, every one of those rooms can tell a story of its own. Their curated collections of furniture styles and prices make Wayfair the trusted destination to turn your home into your happy place. Shop everything home at wayfair.com with free and easy delivery straight to your door.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Welcome to the Tour Coach here in 2023, another year of the stories, the conversations, the roundtable discussions that come from my travels on the PGA and the Korn Ferry Tours, along with my teaching down at Old Palm and Palm Beach Gardens, or here in my studio in Mobile, Alabama. These are the stories and the guests and the people that I run into that I bring to you to help you enjoy playing the game of golf, learning about the game of golf, or learning how to teach the game of golf. I hope you'll enjoy my travels, my conversations, and you enjoy being on this journey with me. But I also want to remind you that this journey and bringing it to you wouldn't be possible without a special thanks to our longtime sponsors. First and foremost, Strixon and Cleveland Golf, Vineyard Vines, Bushnell Golf, and Buick GMC. Without those, the Tour Coach and all these travels wouldn't be possible to bring these conversations to you. I hope you'll enjoy sitting in with me on another version here of the Tour Coach. All right, so thanks everybody for joining us. Sent out an email a few days ago asking, for questions, and we had phenomenal feedback. Sent those questions to Wayne, JP, and Jackson. So we're going to cover most of those today. I'll send another email out in a few weeks. We also had some folks suggest some folks that they'd like to have on. Kevin Kirk and Scott Hamilton were on the list. I think we can, JP, I think me and you could twist both of those. I talked to Kirk yesterday. He said he'd be happy to do it. So anyways, appreciate the feedback. We're going to kind of jump in here. It's also going to be on the Tour Coach podcast because we know I'm lazy. I like to knock out a couple things at one time. But Jackson, you got the questions in front of you. Go ahead and lead us off. You can kind of moderate this, and Wayno and JP and I and Jackson will kind of answer these. We got some fantastic topics, I thought, on teaching.
Yeah. One of the first ones we got was somebody asking about methods to help swing changes stick over time. And I thought that was a great question, especially bridging the gap from, playing a lot, practicing and playing on the golf course, but how to make those swing changes stick over time.
So I learned early on from Wayne and from my mentor, HJ, one of the things I learned was that, to try to get people to change, doing things without a ball and slow speed was some of the most effective, but people don't like to do that very much. So for me, if you watch some of the stuff we put out, through the work I've done with Colby and different things, I know JP's had the same experience with people he's worked with, having people do drills and bands and things where they can acquire a motor skill and they can learn the movement pattern, especially if you're teaching somebody to turn or to shift different things, whatever it is, having people do some sort of an exercise, use resistance bands, different things to have them learn and acquire the new movement pattern, for me, has been a big help, helping people make a change maybe quicker or sooner than they would otherwise. For me, having people hit balls at full speed, trying to make a change is the least effective way. But that seems to be what most people on a lesson tee want to do. They want to swing 100% as fast as they can and then ask you if that looks better or if it's any different. But that, to me, is so as a teacher, it's important for me to try to slow people down, really try to get them away from taking the club out of their hand certain times, having them use bands or drills where they don't have the club and they're not going full speed is some of the most effective things for me. So I thought I'd lead that off.
Always try and help them understand the distinct differences between training, preparation, and performance. So with your training, you're trying to help, like what you're saying, Tony, the movement patterns, the feels, and that may not be on the golf course all the time. It might not even be on the driving range for tour players. Right. That could be in the hotel room or the gym. And then moving that into preparing to play golf. And then, so when you're preparing to play golf, really the things you're going to start to rely on are your routines and your triggers. So when you're putting those different changes into the system where the system's going to lead to the golf course, then you're trying to help people understand that the routines and the triggers have to kind of match up with whatever changes that you've made. And I think that's a very important part of the transference, the transferring of what you're trying to do on the lesson tee to what you're trying to do on the golf course. So, firstly, making people aware that there has to be a transference, making them aware that, they have to go from one, almost one side of the brain to the other. And then how do you take the information and dilute it to a point where they can use it in a more authentic way just to hit a golf shot?
Bueno?
Well, T, I think, just what you've said and Justin said, I mean, I think you have to figure out what you want them to learn how to do. And that's obviously going to be a new motor pattern. And so you have to teach them how to do that. And that's learned slowly. And then once they develop the skill, and you have to help them a lot of times learn how to move whatever part of their body they're trying to learn to do different. You have to do that slowly until they can kind of sort of feel that. Everybody wants to feel it at 100 miles an hour. Well, that doesn't work. And so you have to go slow enough for them to learn to feel it. And when they start to learn to do that, then you get your hands off them and let them go on their own, and do that enough times to where you're starting to fire that new motor pattern where their nervous system may pick that up and be able to do it on their own. But, going full blast or 100 miles an hour, that's not going to work. I mean, you have to make them aware of that. So, and guide them through that and help them through that. Cause we all want to learn. We all want to hit it far. We want to do have fun doing it. But, you've got to learn to do it something slowly before you can learn to execute it at a speed. And, if you do it enough times slowly, your body will learn that and it'll transfer it to ownership. And, once people own it, then they can go ahead and take it to the golf course and someday do it at a speed that you want to play with. So I think slowing down and making the movement pattern, very specific, I think that's the way to do it and make it last, make it not be a one hit wonder, so to speak.
I think it's also important to couple things. One, to explain to them what you're changing and why. I mean, and especially for a lot of the folks listening here, I'm not necessarily talking about tour players, although it's probably applicable to them too, but, explain to the student in front of you why you're wanting to change it and the effect it's going to have on the golf ball and where you're going to go with it down the road. Because I think people are more apt to buy into it and stick with it if you explain to them. JP, you've talked before on here about your first lesson and how it's kind of an hour and a half, 2 hours, and you sit and talk with them, stuff like that. I think one part of the lesson that gets overlooked a lot is the explanation of what you see, why you're making the change, and then the effect that it's going to have on the ball. And I think if you don't do that stuff, I think it's less likely the guy who hits 7 shitty shots in a row is going to stick with it when he leaves if he doesn't understand where you're going with it down the road.
I hope my audio's running okay now, but I was working with a tour player yesterday, and I said to him, listen, if you do this properly, the spin should come off the golf ball a little bit. The window that it comes out should be a little bit lower, and you should probably start your shots to the right with that stronger flight. So if you're doing it right, it should look like that, and if you're doing it wrong, it'll go, it could go high and right, or it could spin up in the air. So I think you're right. Helping them understand what they should expect, I think, is very important.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of helping somebody make a change, because, helping them understand what to expect and then what the benefit's going to be down the road for their game. Jackson, we got some great questions tonight, so I want to make sure we keep going.
Yeah, follow up. Second question was about student retention and keeping them on plan to reach their goals. Any words of wisdom there, gentlemen?
Go ahead there, JP.
When I combine, I use the Coach Now software. I know there's a lot of good stuff with Clip and things. I think, I would encourage the younger teachers to take advantage of that. I think it's going to be ever more part of like the normal kind of lesson experience for people in the next number of years, to be able to look at what was done on the lesson tee, whether that's a simple note or a voice note or some videos and some drills and bits and pieces like that. I think for student retention, it's very, very clever. Because people, 99 smartphone, and they can just pull up that smartphone at a dinner party and say, hey, I was working on this with Jackson. Look at this, and this putting drill he did. And not only does that breed retention, but that also breeds, I guess, word of mouth in 2023, which I think is a good way to build your business.
I agree. I use that OnForm app. I've just delved into that. But I have advanced from my days of writing stuff on a 3x5 note card because I kept finding too many of them on the ground when the student would leave. They were great for me to be able to look at. But I like to make all of my students write down in their cell phone in the notes. But one thing I also try to do, and I think I'm okay at it, is when you're in the middle of a lesson and a student kind of has an epiphany where they verbalize what they feel, like when they've done something different or good or whatever it is we're looking, and they say something, it's like, oh, when I do it, I feel this knee or whatever it is. I just go grab their phone for them right there and have them write down exactly what they just said. Because oftentimes to me, if we let them get to the end of the hour and write it down, sometimes they may not remember exactly what they said or exactly what they felt. And how the hell are we going to expect them to remember that 2 days from now when they go to the driving range? They can't remember it exactly. So I try to be really good about slowing them down. And I learned this from Wayne. The lesson isn't about hitting how many golf balls they can hit. If you want to get better or you teach somebody to get better, sometimes slowing them down. And when they have one of those thoughts, I did this with Will McFadden the other day, Jackson. And it was actually going back to JP, that lesson I was referencing you earlier with when I observed you. He got a funny feel from it and he verbalized it and I had him write it down. And that was all we did for the rest of the lesson. So I think slowing them down and getting them to write it down and commit it is important.
Tony, I think you're right. Getting it into their own words is really important to them. Because we'll talk a lot of times in our verbiage or whatever, and I think something that's really important is getting them to understand whatever the concept is that we're trying to get them to do, and then figure out how to get it into their mind or their verbiage where they're going to be able to understand that and take it for the next 2-3 weeks, whatever the case may be, in order to get them to learn it and feel it their way. Get them to transfer it to their way. I remember H.J. used to tell me, you have to tell them everything you want to tell them and get it all out there. And, you may be overloading them at first, and then you step back and don't say anything for 10 or 15 minutes and let them stand there, especially if they're hitting a good shot or two. Let them stand there and kind of process the feels or process, whatever's happening to them at that point, and then ask them questions. Well, how was that? And what did that feel like? And then when they come with something that is in their verbiage or their world, get them to write it, like you said, onto a note card or into a phone. Note cards have are becoming a thing of the past, obviously, but, get it into their phone so they can take it to the golf course and kind of reactivate that, days or two later, and continue to practice that.
JP, have you advanced past the note card yet? Just checking.
From that, I think we got to be, again, for the younger teachers out there, there is something very powerful for somebody writing something down in their own words.
Mm-hmm.
And that when you write something down, you're more likely to do it. And there's a lot of studies behind that. So, I don't mind. I don't mind the thought of that. Like having them write down or vocalize, like say into a voice note on the phone what they're feeling. I think that's gold for for retention of learning.
Mm-hmm. I think it's good as a teacher too, listening to it, because sometimes I hear a student verbalize something and it clicks for me to share it with another student that's struggling with the same thing. I think having a student who's caught in the process doing it, having them write it down could help us as well, help other students. So, Jackson, onward.
Yeah. So bridging the gap from that to the next question is about pricing, specifically for pricing for long-term coaching programs, and how you would do that for juniors or tournament players.
That's Chip's shot, by the way. Going nuts out here. Stop it. So, go ahead. Repeat that question.
You got a treat? Quick. You got a squirrel treat up there, Tony?
Just chasing some people downtown Mobile.
So again, the question was about pricing for long-term coaching programs, specifically for junior and tournament players. And I think that's great too. And it ties in a little bit to maybe what I would have fed into with student retention. I think something I've learned from you guys is having everything available for those types of players, whether it's stats programs or the app for constant communication, having a database in which you can communicate other things outside of what you're doing on the golf course, stuff away from the golf course that will help them with their games. I think that's a great way to aid in student retention. But ask the question specifically about pricing for long-term coaching programs.
JP, what do you do with that?
It's been interesting. My adventure is probably a little bit different. I probably am 75% tour players at this point. Potentially weighing yourself, you're probably, experiencing more of that. I think for the young teachers out there, I think it's very important not to overpromise and underdeliver. It's much, much better to underpromise and overdeliver. Because when you're working with young players and players who are taking the game very, very seriously, it's like when you're starting off a program with them, it's you're much better off making sure that you put the ground rules in and you say, look, this is what I'm going to give you, this is what you can expect, and then go a little bit beyond that, as opposed to some of the mistakes I would have made in the past, which is saying you can call me anytime you want and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and then all of a sudden you let somebody down. So I think, from that rationale, I don't know whether it answers the question thoroughly, Jackson, but making sure that you have that balance of promising them the right amount and then going a little bit above it. And that will always give them the feel that you care about them, as opposed to the opposite, which is, over promising and under delivering.
Bueno?
I think you're exactly right, JP. I've always tried to lay my programs out to people and tell them, here's what I think you can expect in a year. I'm not trying to ever sell them the year-long package or anything like that. I've never tried to get a bunch of upfront money from people. I don't think that's really good for them or for me. I mean, my incentive would go down once I had my hands on all the cash. So I just try to keep giving good golf lessons, but I try to tell them where they're going to go, or where I think we can take them in a year. I try to tell them what I think is going to be easy, what I think is going to be hard. And one thing I've, as I've gotten, maybe I've gotten to be a little bit better of a teacher. I don't know if I am or not some days, but, I try to tell them where I think what's going to happen to the ball. Just like JP said earlier, here's what I think you can see when when we do it right. And here's what I think you're going to get when you continue to do it your way. And here's what I think the next thing's going to be that we'll end up working on after we continue to get a hold of this concept and maybe master it or get closer to being able to own this move, whatever it may be. And then what I think we're going to do next to continue to make the ball flight better. So I try to give them some positive things or some things that I think are for sure going to happen to where, if they do start to happen, then you gain more credibility. And I think that helps with the retention of clients when they say, well, maybe this guy does know what he's talking about a little bit, So I think the more you can figure out what's going to happen, down the road, and the more you can let them be aware of that, I think the more trust they'll give you as the program continues to move on.
Jackson.
So another question was about pitfalls of tour coaching. Work at home versus work on the road, and also maybe some of the difficulty with time and payment in the two.
JP, you want to start us off on that?
Tony, I think pitfall is very difficult for the people that want to see you regularly at home whenever you're dealing with tour players who are, their schedules tend to be, fairly well matched up, but they want you to work with, and that's just the way it is. So, I've learned that I can pretty much do what I need to do on a Monday, Tuesday after I've come back from an event. Most of the guys who've played and they're taking a week off, they'll take Monday, Tuesday off. Then I have to be very, very flexible. For example, this week, obviously, most of the guys were in Charlotte this week. Some are playing in Dallas. A couple aren't playing in Dallas. So I've left Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday fairly free, knowing that I'm going to have to do some prep for the PGA Championship. So, you've got to start to think from their perspective, and then again, a little bit like the point that I raised before with the and stuff I now know that I can't promise people that I can see them very regularly anymore. I mean, and that's, my example might be slightly different. I have to be able to help people understand that I'm going to be able to be on have to disappoint people a little bit, but at the same time, I can look at a video on an app along the way and make sure I stay connected with people. So I guess all of our situations are a wee bit different. And I know, Tony, you and I talk about that kind of thing a lot. You're doing your great retreats and at Old Palm and all your different things, which is a wee bit different to 2 years ago when you were kind of on the road a wee bit more. And I'm sure my stuff will transition, but I think being transparent with people and trying to communicate where you are with all of your different projects, that always helps me. And I think people tend to be on your side again if you're truthful and honest with them and
I think you have to look at, if you're talking about the professional player, where they are. So JP's got a bunch of guys on the PGA Tour, so their demands are different than 3 guys on the Korn Ferry Tour. And, financially, it doesn't make sense for Korn Ferry guys to have you go out 3 weeks a month. It doesn't make much sense, So so I think it depends on the levels your guys are at. Obviously I've been fortunate, had some time where I was out on tour a bunch. Then I got fired a lot. Now I'm back down to the Korn Ferry Tour. And so, but you have guys coming out and they're turning pro and they're getting starts. And so, that that's a priority for them, because the first time guys play, it's PGA Tour events. It's a big deal for them. So you got to go do whatever you got to do. So I think that how you structure your time and the finances with professional players is a lot dependent on where they are. And I think most professional players kind of understand that. When they get to the PGA Tour, they expect a little more from you than they would if they're playing Latin America. So
to rationalize that with what you want to do. I've had some really good friends in Ireland growing up who probably could have gone on to play the European Tour, but they didn't want to travel. Like I'm in a fortunate position where I'm young-ish enough that I still enjoy traveling. Tony and I talked the other night about, enjoying being on the road a little bit. And, but that's a big ask, to be away from your family and away from your friends. And you've got to figure out whether that's right for you, because a lot of times when we post these swing videos from nice, glamorous events and things like that, it doesn't really tell the story of the really bad car hire that you're driving or the terrible hotel that you're staying in. So you got to figure out, what is right for you with all that adventure as well. In the same way that a lot of players have had to figure that out.
Yeah, agree. And I think the big thing is you find out what works for you and your player, and you just don't go copy what everybody else tells you does. I mean, if you got a player that's moved their way up and it's your first tour player, I mean, you need to, and they're really good, you need to do whatever you got to do to help them. And I think we talked about this one other podcast or one other Zoom, like if you keep the whole goal being making your player better in front of you, normally the other stuff takes care of itself. You'll figure out what the player will tell you what you need. You'll know what you need to do. And I think 8 times out of 10, the money takes care of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Wayno, anything to add, or we'll go to the next question?
Tony, I think you're right. I've never worried about the money. That's probably why I've never made any money. But I don't worry about the money. I try to put it to what the player needs, and I try to do everything I can to get that young player to the PGA Tour. Get them from college, get them to Korn Ferry, get them to the PGA Tour, and every player's different. So some are a little more needy, and some of them want you more. Some of them like to be left a little bit alone. So, I really try to get to know my player as best I can, and take them as far as I can take them, and the money will take care of itself. That's probably why I've remained, even the guys that have quit playing because of injuries and things like that. It's probably why I've remained good friends with a lot of them, because I've never made it a cookie cutter thing. I've made it a very individual thing, and I try to cater to all my students. College kids, high school kids, just regular golfers. I tried to let them know that their game's really important to me, and I do whatever I can to help them. Whether it be, if I'm down at the beach for a weekend, I still am looking at videos that people send me and trying to give them my time, and as best I can, I'm available, all the time. So, sometimes that gets a bit tedious and the travel gets a little bit tough, but, I just think that's the best way to do it that I've felt. And that's what I continue to do.
Jackson.
So, a question specifically for you, JP, and then I got another technical question. These are both technical questions for Tony and Wayne. JP, if you don't mind talking a little bit about the trail arm and how you see it move with good players versus somebody who might have limited external rotation in their trail shoulder.
Well, external rotation stuff is slightly rated. I think having a really, really correct trail hand grip, having correct trail wrist movement into being able to hold the shoulder properly, because once we're in posture, like our trail arm isn't going, players, I don't think our trail arm's going way outside of our posture line, if you like. If you take a TPI 90-90 test, and of course there is there's an amount of external rotation, but I think I think we're in a, I understand the question, and I think we need to make sure that really good grip mechanics, really, really good trail wrist mechanics, understanding where the trail arm needs to be at setup, and how it loads up. And I think, guys, technically that has helped me an awful lot over the years. Pete Cowan was, that was one of the things really for about 5 or 6 years on the European Tour, he was really into making sure everybody moved their trail arm correctly in the golf swing. And it bred a series of golfers who were extremely were able to hit a pressure cut an awful lot. So I think it's a very, very good way of starting to understand some of the finer mechanics in the golf swing. I hope that answers a little bit the elite level part of the question. Say that from a, and when I look at players who aren't maybe just as advanced, we see maybe the trail arm going like external really, really quickly, and opening up. But again, that could well be like a sequencing problem. That could be a grip problem. That could be something that happens very, very early on in the golf swing. Then they're trying to recover that. So you're getting back into the weeds of that. You're making sure that the player has, a beautiful right hand grip, a beautiful trail wrist arrangement. I like the DST, the swing trainer. I like Sean's Pro Sender. I know Sean doesn't need me to make him any more money. Wayne would laugh at that. But some of those things will really help for finer trail arm mechanics.
That's awesome.
Okay, what about Tony and Wayne? Some drills for loading the pivot.
Well, I mean, I for me, a lot of single leg stuff. I do a lot of single leg stuff. And I think that one thing that I've learned is that sometimes, and we're talking about a lot of recreational golfers here, but also even better players, is you have to see if they've got enough stability in their trail side to be able to load. Like sometimes you get a 50, 60-year-old guy. I had a guy in at Old Palm like a week ago, and I mean, he was trying like crazy, but when you had him do a pivot drill and stand on just his trail leg, he almost fell down and hit his head. It's like, how's that guy going? So, I do a lot of single leg stuff and train people on both legs independently to help them build stability, to be able to do some of the exercises and do some of the exercise better. And then my favorite one is just a resistance band under the lead foot. And then you take your grip with the club and you have the band in there and just turn and stretch the band. And as a side note, that also helps people. And I can't explain why. JP will probably know this way more than me, but when you do it with that resistance band, they also kind of have to work their trail arm correctly to move the band and move the club up and down, because they couldn't really, you don't ever see anybody really use their trail arm incorrectly with that resistance band, helps them set their wrist correctly and stuff like that. It's kind of interesting as a side note that I've kind of figured that out.
Sure. They can't, once the pressure goes, the band would flop.
Yeah.
Sure, correctly, which again, you can't get external too quickly then, because
right.
The band would flop behind you. You would have to load it properly.
Mm-hmm. Wayno?
I do the same stuff. I try to get them to stretch that band behind them, and I try to not get them. Everybody's trying to get their hands too far behind their body, and they can't really do it. Whether they're just too tight in their shoulder or whatever, but they try to get the club too far behind them a lot of times, and so I try to get that band stretching away from them, and try to keep them how to keep their hands together. Get the left hand on the grip and the right trail hand on the grip correctly, and then try to keep their hands together and teach them how to stretch the band away from them. I use that little pivot board that I believe Mark Sheftick, I don't know what it's called. Is it the Sheftick pivot board or whatever? I use one of those a lot so they can feel when their body turns, how the weight will move into the back foot, and then how the shift will get them into the front leg a little bit, and then the turn can happen after that. So I try to put the sequence of all that together, and I've learned a lot just from watching you and K Wayne with the one leg drills. And you're right. If a person can't even stand on one foot, how are they ever going to turn their whole body into that leg if they can't even just stand there and balance? So I think that's a good indicator of if they can or can't do that, of what you're dealing with, and how you would go about it. I think if they can't stand on one foot, I think you may keep them on that board a little longer so they can feel how that little board will move, and then maybe add the resistance band a little later, once they've learned to move their body into the trail leg and do that pretty good, then they can learn to maybe add the arms to it and the hands and learn to stretch that band away from them. So it just depends on who you're dealing with, but those are kind of the three ways I go about doing it.
And Jackson, the other thing I've been fooling around before we go to
one more quick thing on the shoulders. who's listening can correct me. I don't think we've got really, really good, clear 3D on exactly what's happening with the shoulders in golf. The shoulders are very complicated, and they're moving through 3 dimensions, and they're a ball and socket. Absolutely know exactly what's going on with the shoulders in the golf swing from a science perspective yet. I know Michael Neff and the guys from Gears are trying to do some stuff with the shoulders, and complexity of actually getting inside the shoulder joint and trying to put markers on so we can actually tell exactly what those 2 shoulder joints are doing in the golf swing. We haven't done that yet.
And along that same lines, and this actually goes to when I came over and watched you with Michael and did that. Like, I just based on the stuff I teach, I've been real interested in how much the rib cage moves back and through. And JP and I've had a couple talks about that. And so through that, I've kind of started fooling around with that true turn, which was developed, I believe, like for, physical therapy actually, but it's pretty unique in how it kind of separates the upper body, kind of hooks under the rib cage and uses a resistance band. That true turn I've found pretty good, kind of combining the resistance and then with some of the thoughts I have about helping somebody wind the rib cage up and different things like that. So, that's in addition to what I was saying. And so, again, I've talked to JP, as you know, I'm trying to pick Michael Neff's brain a little bit on that, on measuring what the rib cage does in good players, especially going through the ball. So, Jackson, on to the next.
All right. I've got 3 questions left, and I'm going to kind of shoot them to each, one to you, Tony, one to JP, and one to Wayno. So I'm going to start with you, T-Ball. Do you have any advice for dealing with being fired and continuing to believe in yourself and your process?
Why does everybody aim that at me?
I don't know, Tony.
Must that question come from Frederica or something? You know what? And I mean, I'd love to hear JP and Wayne's thought on this. Look, I think all of us at some point when you get fired, I mean, I think it's human nature, no matter what anybody says, like you question, like, what did you do wrong? What could you do better? So I'm very fortunate in that I've got great people around me that when I've gone through times where I've gotten fired, JP and Wayne, but JP in particular, JP's taken me to dinner a few times and bought me 6 or 7 bottles of wine. I've always felt that helped me. But I think, I think if you're in this business and you care and you want to do well, you just have to understand that you're going to get fired sometimes. And sometimes it's your fault. Sometimes it's not, but it's just part of it. But that doesn't make it feel any better when you get fired. So I think, if you're good at what you do, you're going to have times that you get fired, and you're going to have times that you look inward at yourself and say, could I do better at this? What do I need to do more of to get better? Heck, JP, not long ago, I texted you a question about something about that. And you picked up the phone and called me. So I think that's human nature. I think that's a sign that you actually give a shit about what you're doing if you question yourself and you look inward when things aren't going well. But I don't think that necessarily means you really lost your confidence. And, but that's my thoughts.
Yeah. Okay, Drano.
Really quickly on that, Jackson,
Yeah.
if I could. My mentor, Butch Harmon, he said to me, you've got to recognize that there are 2 parallel things that are going to happen. You're going to have a personal relationship with a player, which may or may not, be long by the player. And then you've got a professional relationship with a player. And inevitably, the professional relationship will end. And you want to try and make sure the personal relationship continues, because that's a really cool part of golf. So what he was basically saying is it's part of the process that you're going to get fired, and it's just going to happen. Not like if you're with a player for 5 years and he texts you and tells you, I don't want to, that's not very nice. So you hope that people are going to work with you with respect and dignity, and they're going to respect the work that you've put in. But at the same time, getting fired is part of what we do. Try and do things the right way. Try and enjoy the personal relationship you have with players, and accept that it may or may not come to an end at some point.
Yeah, that's great. And I think if you handle it the right way, you also, I've had several guys that I work with now left me, that Ben Carr, Andy Ogletree, that left, and we left on good terms, and they came and you told them what they needed to hear. And sometimes I think you get fired for telling them what you think the truth is, and they don't like it. And if you handle it the right way, that a lot of times they come back.
I agree with that.
Real quick, sorry, Wayne, 1 sec. That when you sometimes if you think back to being players, like you need to hear different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you need to hear different stuff, and then they have to go somewhere else. And to your point, Tony, maybe they go, all right, I've heard that now, and I really enjoy the time with Tony, so I'm going to go back with Tony.
Goes back to the 6 bottles of wine, JP. It always does. Jackson, you want to belt out another one?
Sure. So question was about organizing practice specifically for a high school team, but maybe a college team as well. How would you organize practice for younger kids?
Jay, Wayno, lead us off. You got kind of shut out of that last one.
Well, I try to get the practice to be specific. I mean, so many people just go hit golf balls. Well, that's fine. But, I try to, if we're going to work on our game, let's work on our game. Let's try to figure out what part of the program you're in, and let's learn to do that. And let's practice that. And then let's move on to the next thing. If we're going to work on putting, let's work on our aspects of putting, our fundamentals, how you hold it, how you stand up to it. If you want to take it another step, then let's work on, line control. How do we aim? How do we, roll it up a chalk line, whatever the case may be. And then there's the other case of how do you control your speed, and then how do you match those things up? Let's make it very specific instead of just standing on the green, hitting about 20, 30 foot putts and calling it a day's practice. So I try to isolate those things with the young kids, and, it's amazing, but the coaches that are out there, certainly most of the high school coaches, they're really math teachers that know how to play golf. And so they become coaches. And so they're not.
Did we just lose Wayne?
I think we did.
All right, JP, go ahead. Jump in there.
Well, I think what he was saying was very, very good. I mean, that specific nature of making sure that you have a plan and you delve into, the part of the game, and then maybe even deeper into the part of the game. I always remember I used to work for David Howell, brilliant English golfer, and he said he couldn't believe the amount of people came out onto the putting green. They just putted. But he always came out and he went, right, what am I doing? I'm working on my green reading. I'm working on my start line. I'm working on my speed. And that was 10, 12, years ago. And I guess everybody in the professional game is doing that. But I think what Wayne was alluding to was the fact that you need to have a plan. You need to delve into exactly what you want to do. And then from there, I think you can produce some really cool content.
Yeah, I mean, agree 1,000%. I like to script out practice and give practice schedules to my players. And I like to even give them ball counts. Like, I want you to do 20 balls with this, 20 balls with that, so they don't get caught up and lost and just hitting balls. And, or they also don't get that thought where if I don't hit 200 balls, then I haven't done any work, but be very specific and, hit 20 balls doing this drill, then hit 20 balls where you change clubs and targets each time. That helps transfer the swing work to the golf course. And then I also like to help show them how to set up a practice station. What should their aim? I mean, especially when you're talking high school kids, like, how do you set up a rope, or how do you set up your aiming sticks? How do you set up a stick for playing if that's what you're coaching them? Be specific and show them exactly how to set it up. And kind of going back to our notes early, have them take a picture of their practice station and keep it in their phone so they remember how to set it up. Jackson, one more question.
Last question is about practice habits for competition or for better players, and if you had learned anything from a caddy perspective.
Say that again, word that again.
So practice habits for competition or competitive players, and if you had learned anything cool from the caddy or caddy's perspective.
And I've tried to take advantage of caddying for players when they've either asked me or had the chance to do it. I mean, I caddied in the Dubai Desert Classic a number of times, and the RSM Classic for Louis Oosthuizen, and I think if the question is from a caddy's perspective, I think what it does is it helps you to understand how non-mechanical the game of golf is when you're actually playing it. And I think as coaches, we all, we can talk about the trail arm and we can talk about, X factor, whatever. But when you're actually playing golf, you can't think about any of that stuff at all. And I think when you caddy for people, you really understand, or when you play tournaments yourself, you really understand, well, like if you're going to be successful, you're not thinking about a lot of that stuff. So I think if the question's phrased as to what you learn from caddying or from a caddy's perspective, I mean, all the caddies that I liaise with and are friends with, they're always, okay, swing stuff, but we don't want you to do it on a Wednesday. We want, do your swing stuff on Monday and Tuesday, but don't start talking to them about swing on a Wednesday, and definitely don't start talking to them about it during tournament days. So I think it can really level the playing field of where our role is just coaching and cheerleading and strategy and making sure they're doing the right things, and where is it making sure their golf swings are correct.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, a lot of the stuff I would always use caddies. I'd always pick their brain to find out what was really going on, because the player will just tell you they hit it like shit, right? But the caddy might say, or they putted terrible or whatever it is. Whereas the caddy will say, actually, other than 2 shots, he really hit it pretty good. But this is where there was a struggle. So I think having a great relationship, obviously, with the caddy is important. And I've been around some great ones that I've still got great relationships with. And, as far as practice, I always tried to be very situational. And I know I'll just share, like Lucas and I we played this drill, where I would randomly scatter 3 balls every other hole on the front. So we ended up doing 9 balls. He had to putt them out. I'd randomly scatter them. And if he got more than 6 out of 9, I paid him $5 a ball. If he made less than 6 out of 9, he then mowed me $5 a ball. And it was knowing your player. He's very competitive. He's a great athlete. It was a great way to get him to work on chipping and putting in a situational way while still out on the golf course playing and, using, Venmo and $5 back and forth, helped him kind of stay in the moment and get something out of practice. So that's just a little story and Coop loved doing it as well. So anything else, Jackson?
That's all the questions I got for now, T.
JP, that was awesome. You knocked it out of the park again, buddy. All right. Thank you, JP. But I tell you what, this has been our most technically challenged one in a while. Again, thanks to everybody for responding to the emails. I'm going to send another one out next week. We're going to try to do a better job of getting some dates out there. We're going to line up some guests and ask for more questions. Hope you all enjoy it, and we'll see y'all next time.
Thank you, guys.
26. I'm at this 26 years, and I'm still trying to work out the trail arm stuff. So.
Was there any more questions on any of the? Okay, just making sure. No, perfect. Okay. All right, we'll talk next time. Thanks, JP. Guys.
I hope you enjoyed this edition of The Tour Coach and this conversation that we brought to you about playing, learning, and teaching the game of golf. We'll be back next week with another edition of The Tour Coach. In between now and next week, make sure you follow us on our social channels. You can always find me at The Dew Sweeper on Instagram, or go to our YouTube page where you'll see a scene and a video from my teachings daily on our YouTube channel. You can find that by looking up Tony Ruggiero and the Dew Sweepers on YouTube. Until then, make sure you follow and check out Everything Tour Coach and all our sponsors, Srixon Cleveland Golf, Bushnell, Vineyard Vines, and Buick GMC. I'll be back next week to help all of us appreciate, learn, and enjoy the game of golf.